Okay, good evening, everyone. We're continuing in the Mesilas-Yesharim, closing in on the introduction. Mesilas-Yesharim has quoted a very important pasuk in Dvarim that gives the basic points of the perfect avodas Hashem, which includes fear of Hashem, that we explained yesterday what that really means, going in Hashem's ways, that we explained what it means. And we have three more to cover. Ava, love, shleimus halev, perfection of heart, and shmiras kol mitzvahs, and observing of all the mitzvahs. So we're continuing in the Mesilas-Yesharim from the word ha'ahava, as he discusses the love. So how does he describe love very briefly? She'anikba b'leva adam, it should be instilled within the heart of a person. Ave love yisbarech, a love for Hashem, at she'tisorer nafsho, lasos nachas ruach lefanov, to the point that it's within the person's heart a love for Hashem, which stimulate to do what was pleasing before Hashem, what will give Hashem nachas ruach. Just as one's heart is aroused to give pleasure to his father and mother. If a person loves their parent, they want to give pleasure to their parents. Similarly, it should be aroused in a person to give pleasure to Hashem. They want Hashem to get nachas. And he concludes this paragraph, a person will be distressed if either he or others are lacking in this love or giving this nachas ruach to Hashem. He'll be zealous for this and will greatly rejoice when there's anything which is pleasing to Hashem. So the person will have a lot of simcha. Where is a person meant to get his joy? If you love someone and you see that someone has something good happening to them, that should make you happy. So it's very interesting to note over here, what is one of the tests of altruistic love in contrast to self-centered love? What would be a way of testing this is that when we're looking at altruistic love, the interest that you have for the object of your love is that the person should be pleased, as opposed to that I am doing the pleasing for that person. And you may say, what's the difference? Here's the difference. One who has an altruistic love for one's parent, for example, their greatest wish is that the parent should be pleased, and the child is just as happy if somebody else does the pleasing for the parent or not. If you love someone, you just want to see that that other person is happy. A self-centered love says like this, the person says, I want to do it for my parents so that they appreciate me. That's the difference. In both cases, you're ensuring that the parent gets what they need and they're very happy to have an avol nachas. But self-centered love is that I want my parents to get nachas so they'll be pleased with me. So it comes back to me at the end. And therefore, you'll be quite jealous if another one of the siblings provides nachas for the parents. You're going to be jealous. How come they're not recognizing what I'm doing for them? So that's a critical way of understanding the difference, that you could find this in mitzvah observance as well. You know, when we deal with, this is not so nageh with our kehillah baruch Hashem. I'm just using this as an example. Let's say when we're talking about giving kibudim, honors out at special religious occasions. Let's say on Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah, you know, that's to please Hashem. Right? Hashem gets a lot of nachas. There's many Jews dancing with the Torah. So what should make you happy for Hashem? To see there's many people dancing with the Torah. Even if you're not the first one to get the Torah. But a person who's making a point that I have to be getting the first hakafa, I'm the first one honored with the Torah, because I want to give Hashem so much nachas, that's not the way we want to do it. The main thing is Hashem getting nachas, not are you the one providing the nachas So now that Hashem has to appreciate you. That's the difference between altruistic love and self-centered love. The episode of Korach is a good example of self-centeredness masquerading under the guise of devotion to God. Korach was saying, I'm doing this all for Hashem. It's better that all the Jews are holy and all the Jews should be able to serve Hashem. But really, that wasn't it. It was all about themselves. So again, this plays into, and I don't want to get into the Psak Halacha over here at all, but this gets into the idea of people still pushing to want to go to Minyan, and Rav Asher Weiss mentioned over the weekend, he was discussing in Eretz Yisrael how he still maintains that there should be nothing more than porch minyanim, and that's it. And no outdoor minyanim, even though the government is, according to law, allowing outdoor minyans in the fields, whatever, in the courtyards of 19 people. He said that's according to the law, but according to Jewish standards, he does not allow it. He is saying it should only be in a porch because there's no way people can mingle when you're in one porch and not with other people. So again, that's an idea. So that's a hard psak to accept. It's a hard psak. And now in Eretz Yisrael, they're beginning to relax things. Okay, every place has their own standards, and I'm not saying Toronto has any comparison to that at all. I'm just saying, so the question is, are you doing it to please Hashem, or are you doing it to please yourself? And many people are doing it because they want to daven in a minyan, but maybe Hashem is not the one who wants you to daven in the minyan. Maybe Hashem wants you to be more careful about the health, and that you should be spreading the COVID-19 to seniors who are more at risk. So a person has to always remember, if you want to give, do you want to have Hashem to have the nachas, or do you want to be the one to give him the nachas? So of course, oh look, I'm davening a minyan. We're fighting for Hashem, and look, there's people davening. Or you say, well, what's going to give Hashem the nachas? Maybe it gives Hashem the nachas, not what I want to be able to do. And that really goes into the next point that Luzzatto talks about. Let's look at the fourth point, continuing in the text, starting with the words shleimus halev, wholeheartedness. What is that? Who? Shetia ha'avoda lefanav yisbarach b'tor ha'kavana. That means serving Hashem with the most pure motivations. Dahainu, which means letachlis avodaso bilvad. That the goal of your behavior is service to Hashem alone, v'lo l'shum peni acheres, and not for any other ulterior motives. V'nichlal bazen, it's included in that. Shi'alibo sholem b'avoda, his heart should be wholesome in his service to Hashem, and to not exhibit the following two characteristics. Number one, v'lo, and not kiposeach al shtei hasipim, not that his interests are divided in two, or or by observing the mitzvahs as a matter of rote and habit. But rather his whole heart should be dedicated to what he is doing. So what Luzzatto is saying over here is that a personal interest in performing a mitzvah can detract greatly from the virtue manifest in the observance. It's not enough just to do the mitzvah, but your whole heart has to be into the mitzvah, and that's the only reason that you're doing it. So let's take a look at each one of these two aspects. Let's look at the one of not having any other interests. Or Chaim Shmulevitz, a Colonel of Bracha, he quotes a medrash. The medrash says something pretty scary. It says the avera of taking interest on a loan. We know Jews may not lend other Jews money with interest. And he said, the medrash says how terrible the consequence is. The medrash says for any other sin that you do, a person can do an avera. Of course, there's prosecution going on, but there are always malachim who will intercede and plead on behalf of the person for mercy. And they'll give all kinds of arguments to judge him favorably, to mitigate the avera in Hashem's court up above. But not the case with charging interest. where no plea for mercy is allowed to enter from the angels towards Hashem. So Reb Chaim asks, why? What's so terrible about the avera of taking interest? So Reb Chaim explains that a person who lends money on interest, he thinks mistakenly that he's doing a great mitzvah by lending the person money. He'll rationalize it and say, well, after all, I'm taking less interest than the bank, and perhaps the person won't even qualify for a loan at the bank. Quite often, people come to private individuals because they can't get a loan from the bank and they need the money badly. But if he is genuinely doing the mitzvah and trying to do the will of Hashem by lending money, it has to be done as a chesed, as an interest-free loan. But when the person accepts interest, what's really happening is he's profiting from what he thinks is a mitzvah. And he is deluding himself into thinking that he's a tzaddik. To which Reb Chaim is saying, that's what the Medrash is saying, says there's no defense for such self-delusion. So therefore, we see the mitzvahs are done wholeheartedly. You're doing it just because of mitzvah, and you don't plan on benefiting at all from that mitzvah. That goes very far. That's why the Mishnah Pirkei Avos says when we do mitzvahs, we don't do them with the primary intention of being rewarded from Hashem, even though we know there is a reward, but that's not our primary intention. That's a discussion for another time. The other aspect, we said, of wholehearted devotion, service to Hashem, is that it's not mechanical. It's not by rote. So, and if we don't have our minds to it, so what are we really doing? So Reb Levi Yisrael Berditchev, he once was in Shul with somebody, and somebody just finished the Amida, and Reb Levi Yisrael goes over to him, and it was a fellow who was a regular in the minyan. He hadn't gone out of town. He was there every day. So Reb Levi Yisrael comes over and says, Shalom Aleichem, which is usually a greeting you make when somebody comes, from out of town or something. So the fellow looks at him kind of strangely, like, what's the Shalom Aleichem for? So Reb Levi Yisrael said, listen, during the Amida, I could tell you were already in the marketplace in Kiev, and now you're back, so I'm welcoming you back. In other words, the tzaddik was able to understand when the fellow's davening Shemon Esrei, his mind is all over the place, and he's not concentrating on his davening. So that's another aspect. And certainly in any relationship we have with people, we're not going to feel such a strong bond with people when they're doing things for us, but they're not paying any attention with what they're doing. And that's the wholehearted service of Hashem. And finally, the fifth aspect that Luzzatto brings up is Shmiras Kol HaMitzvos, observing all the mitzvahs, Kimashma'o, as the words simply imply in the text. And then he adds the Hainu, which means Shmiras Kol HaMitzvos Kulan, observing all the mitzvahs, B'chol Dikdukayim U Sinoayim, with all their details and all their specifics. So what does that mean? What he's adding is, number one, we have to do all the mitzvahs. As the Torah tells us, you're not allowed to add to the mitzvahs, you're not allowed to detract to the mitzvahs, and you have to be able to do all the mitzvahs. But the mitzvahs also have a lot of details in the mitzvahs. Any mitzvah you want, they're all filled with details. Putting on tefillin, all the laws of tefillin. There's somebody once figured out there's like 25,000 different laws, details in regard to putting on and having kosher tefillin. And if you're missing one detail, then it's you don't get credit for the mitzvah. You don't get credit for the mitzvah. You're supposed to say the Shema at night, but you want to say it early. If it's way too early, you don't get any credit for the mitzvah. Pesach Seders. You can't start the Seder until the stars come out. A person wants to have the Seder earlier in the day when he can eat supper at a reasonable time. You could have all the greatest intentions in the world, and you could say the Haggadah for hours and hours, but if you say it at the wrong time, you have not accomplished the mitzvah. There's so many examples of this that details really are critical. And a lot of people ask, well, what do I care about the details? As long as I did it. So you got to remember, just like, we had something with the Shul today. The Shul, there's all kinds of government programs available. And nowadays, you can only do things online. You can't talk to anybody. That's it. You cannot talk to anybody. So we have to get a hold of the CRA, or we have to go online to apply for something. And our accountants were helping us with this. So a real simple thing is you have to put the name of the person whose name is on the account. You figure that would be a difficult thing, the name on the account. Okay, so name of the account for the Westmount Shul. But if you're just looking for the name of the account on the Westmount Shul, forget it. You ain't getting in. And this was, there's a lot of grants available, and we're could very well be legally able to get the grant, but you only could go online. So they want to know the name of the person who's the signing officer, whatever, the person whose name is in their books, okay? So we tried a bunch of names, and, the computer's saying, no, it doesn't match, So we have a lot of things we have to worry about because, although we're the Westmount Shul, but when we started years ago, we called ourselves Roots Jewish Center. So they only are Gores Roots Jewish Center. And then they're trying to figure out, who's the person's, the one name that is associated with the account. In other words, when it was set up years ago, what was the name that was associated with it? So they're trying my name. They're trying, it doesn't go. They'll try somebody else, try the president's Shul, the name is going back and forth with the accountant in the office, trying to figure out what's going on. So it seems that, there's many names I go by. Legally, I have an English name. I've got the name everybody calls me, Yossi. So we tried the English name, it didn't work. Tried Yossi, didn't work. Tried everything. It was going on the whole morning. So then Shireen says, you know what? For some reason, I think, originally, we went with your regular Hebrew name, Yosef. Bing, that one went through. Okay? So what do you learn from that? You learn from that, you could, the government wants to give you the money. You definitely need the money. You have the email address. You have the website. You got all the facts. You've taken care of everything. But you're 2 letters off. You're not getting a penny. So the same thing when you're doing mitzvahs. The details are critical because a mitzvah has to be performed in a particular way. Now, certainly, even though we said it has to be done altruistically and it shouldn't be for any other desires and out of love and all these other things, but the bottom line is you got to do the mitzvah exactly the way Hashem says to do the mitzvah. And when people take shortcuts in doing the mitzvahs, they're not doing exactly what Hashem says. When a person says, I don't have to do all the mitzvahs, they're not doing exactly what Hashem says. And one deviation. Now in halacha, there's some room for leniency where we say, if you didn't do it this way, b'diavad, after the fact, it's okay. But quite often, it's not. I'll give you a simple example that's going to start tonight. It's every night, really. But for everyone, there's a mitzvah to say the Shema. Now, there's a lot of rules in saying the Shema. I'm not going to bore you with all the rules. And many rules, even if you don't initially, but after that is okay. But here's a very simple rule. When you say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, if you merely say those words and don't give them any thought, you get 0 credit for the mitzvah. Because the mitzvah is to accept the yoke of heaven upon yourself. And if you're just saying the words, even if you're saying them long and singing Shema Yisrael, you're not. But more than that, you must also have in mind when you say Hashem's name, Shema Yisrael Hashem, while you're saying Hashem's name, you have to have in mind that it's a contraction of Hoya, Hova, V'yiyah, Hashem was, is, and will always be, and that he is our master, the Adonai aspect. You must have that in mind. The 2 times you say Hashem's name. And when you say Elokeinu, you must have in mind that he is the master of all forces. You must have that in mind. And if you don't, zero credit for the mitzvah. So that shows it can't just be, number one, something by rote. And this is a diktuk. This is a particular detail. And how often do we not care about these types of things? So the truth of the matter is, if you really care about something, you will be careful with the details. So, when you're dealing with government, you don't care that much about government, but then you find out, boy, the details are important. But, let's look at, for example, a simple example. A wife is preparing dinner for her husband. Okay, so, or a husband's preparing dinner for his wife, either way. And you just put the food out on you bring a serving tray, just put it out and say, help yourself. Okay, the food's there. If you set the table nicely and you fold the napkin nicely and, the decor, the detail of the decor is something special, then the person can tell that you really feel that they are special because you're so worried that every detail should come out right. And that's part of what a relationship with Hashem is about. Because we know when it's our simcha, we want every detail to be right. So when it's Hashem's simcha of us doing a mitzvah, we should want every detail to be just as correct. Okay, let's continue. We're wrapping it up here. So he continues, V'nei kol eila klolim. He says, all these principles that I've just discussed, trichim perush gadol, needs a lot of explanation. Let me continue with the English so we can finish this up, hopefully. He says, our sages have classified the elements of character refinement in an orderly formula arranged according to the steps necessary for acquiring them properly. This order is mentioned in various places in the Talmud. One of them is in Tractate Avodah Zarah, page 20b. From this, and this is the quote, from this Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair derived, and here is in English, he says, Torah leads to watchfulness, and watchfulness leads to diligence. Diligence leads to cleanliness. Cleanliness leads to abstinence. Abstinence leads to purity. Purity leads to piety. Piety leads to humility. Humility leads to fear of wrongdoing. Fear of wrongdoing leads to sanctity. Sanctity leads to holy spirituality. And holy spirituality leads to resurrection. There's all Hebrew terms for this, and we don't have time to explain any of these terms. But what is Luzzatto pointing out over here? He's telling us that Pinchas ben Yair has provided an orderly, sequential progression of gradation and steps whereby the goal of spirituality can be realistically achieved and retained. And that's a very important theme because some components of spirituality are prerequisites for others. And if one leaps ahead and skips a step, you can end up with nothing. For example, the Midrash says that when the Jewish people crossed the Sea of Reeds, the revelation that they saw was so amazing that even a maidservant saw a revelation of Hashem, more so than the visions of the prophet Ezekiel, who was an incredible tzaddik. So we'd assume that the intensity experience that they had must have been so amazing that they reached the highest levels, which they probably did. But then just 3 days later, after the splitting of the sea, the Jewish people rebelled against Moshe and they wanted to go back to their enslavement in Egypt. So what happened? Had they been transformed to see such a very special vision? What's going on over here? The answer is that they weren't prepared for that great spiritual high. Their own spiritual level before the splitting of the sea was not adequate for the prophetic visions that would have an impact upon them. And therefore, they could not be integrated into them that would help influence their thoughts, their emotions, and behavior from that point afterwards. There are those who give a beautiful mashal to this, and they say there is no elevator for spirituality. Ramchal is emphasizing it's a step-by-step process. You have to master the first step before you go to the second step. You have to master the second step before you go to the third step, etc., etc. And if you fail at any step, it's like, for example, giving a highly sophisticated computer to a child in kindergarten. The child's not prepared for it. So Judaism's not an elevator that you just go right up to the top floor. Rather, it's the stairs. And just like they say in the health professionals, always take the stairs instead of the elevator. It's much healthier. The same thing in Yiddishkeit. Take the stairs one step at a time and don't take the elevator. Things have to be done in an orderly fashion. I know many of us are not patient. We just want to have this great end goal, but it's not possible. There's step after step after step. You got to start with Torah, and then Torah leads to watchfulness. So you've got to have Torah. You've got to understand what the midah of zihirus, watchfulness, is. And then you go to diligence, rizus, alacrity, one at a time, and that's how you're able to accomplish it. Let me finish the last paragraph here so we can finish. So he continues, v'hinei, and behold, al pi ha'braisa and those, based on this brisa, based on this piece of Talmud, I'm going to base my work on this. Now listen carefully. It says, in order to teach myself and to remind others of the conditions essential for perfecting the divine service. For each step, I shall explain its character, what it's made up, its division or details, how it is acquired, what may detract from it, and how one can guard himself against such detractions. And now he emphasizes, I'll be reading this myself, and all who find it pleasing may do so as well, so that together we could learn to fear Hashem and not forget our obligations to him. The physical component of our nature tends to discourage spirituality, but the reading and contemplation of this book will return it to our memories and arouse us to do that which we are commanded. And he finishes with the paragraph, Hashem yeh v'chislenu. He says, may God be with our aspirations and protect us from faltering. May there be fulfillment of the prayer of Tehillim, where King David says, teach me, O God, your ways so that I can walk in your truth. Unify my heart to fear your name. So how is Luzzatto ending? Basically, the Gemara in Baba Metzia says, as a rule, correct yourself first and only then correct others. It's a basic principle of teaching and parenting that you cannot successfully convey to others that which you don't practice yourself. And Ramchal therefore states, he's saying that he too needs to follow the prescription for spiritual growth and development, and he hopes that other people will join him in striving for that spirituality. You see, some people aspire to be teachers and leaders, and they can be condescending. They feel, oh, I've already achieved my goals, and I can impart from my experience and my erudition to other people. And Luzzatto, who is an amazing genius, he doesn't make such a claim. To the contrary, he's saying that this work is primarily to provide a framework of spiritual growth for himself, but that all those who want to wish and join him together are welcome to come. So that shows his great humility, and that's what teaching and learning is all about. We're learning together. Yes, the teacher has what to impart, but the teacher has to be learning together, and he wants to grow. And those are the really good teachers. The ones who want to grow with the learning, and they share the growth experience with their students together. That's what Luzzatto's saying. But at the very end, he says, when all is said and done, we can only try our best. And success in this venture of spirituality, like everything, only comes with the blessings from Hashem. And therefore, he closes and says, Amen, Kain Yehi Ratzon. Amen, may it be God's will that we succeed in achieving refinement of our character traits and in spiritual growth. And with that, he ends the introduction. So we can end that same way. But let us hope as we tomorrow begin the first chapter, that with Hashem's help, we'll be able to go step by step and be able to succeed in our spiritual growth. Have a good night, everyone. Those who want to hear the Parsha class, I'm going to just have to close the meeting for just a few seconds, and then I'll just restart it. I don't even know if you have to go off. You could probably even stay, but I have to close in order for the tape to shut and have to restart it. So we'll be with you shortly. Have a good night, everyone.